Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission here is, well, pretty simple. Take a stack of complex sources, pull out the core insights, and give you the ultimate shortcut to getting up to speed. Today, we're diving into some fascinating research. It connects the economies of Italy and the Arab Gulf, the whole Mediterranean, really, through something that doesn't really mislead you.
Yeah,
Language.
that's right. We're not focusing on, say, treaties or big political statements today. We're looking right into the accountant's ledger. And the sources, they reveal something quite profound, this centuries-long bond between the Mediterranean world and the Gulf. It's actually etched right into the language of commerce. So this dive is all about showing you how really ordinary, almost mundane words, think invoice or warehouse, actually carry these shared practical ways of keeping score. Methods that reduced friction and really slash the cost of trading across massive cultural divides.
Okay, let's unpack that. I think the best place to start is with maybe the most striking example. It's right there in the preface of one of our main sources. It tells this story about an accountant working in Dubai, and they hear the Arabic word for a receipt or an invoice, fattura.
Right. And this person, because they had Mediterranean roots, they instantly hear it. It sounds almost exactly like the Italian fattura. And it does the same job. What's so amazing here isn't just, that they sound alike. That's interesting, sure. But this linguistic twin, it survived. Why? Because it performed an identical, absolutely crucial function.
So it's really about the job the word does, not just how it sounds, functional identity.
Exactly. Look at the document itself. Doesn't matter if it's like old parchment from the 14th century or a digital file today. The fattura, they sit in the same spot on the page. They do the same critical thing. They standardize proof, seller, buyer, quantity, unit price, total, date. It's all there. That shared structure, that's your bedrock for economic trust. It's hard to argue about who owes what when both sides use the same template for proof of sale.
Right, that's the beauty of standardization, isn't it? It's not just agreeing on names, it's defining the whole interaction. So, okay, if the invoice is foundational, what other words show this shared workflow across different ports, different offices?
Oh, there's a great list. You can literally trace the flow of goods and money through these near-twin institutional terms. Let's start with enforcement. The state's role. You've got the Italian Dogana, the customs office. It lines up directly with the Arabic Diwan, which originally meant, the fiscal bureau, the state register. So right away, you see they're aligned on how taxes and duties were handled, tracked.
That's huge.
Yeah.
That implies a shared understanding of, state authority over trade, a common bureaucratic language.
Absolutely. And once the goods cleared customs, where did they end up? Well, the storage was standardized too. The Italian magazzino for warehouse. It aligns with the Arabic maxan. Basically, a storehouse or depot, you can just picture it, right? A Genoese merchant in, say, Alexandria using a building maybe called a fondaco, we'll get to that,
Yeah.
and the goods inside being tallied using a term like maxan. It's one shared reality, physically and linguistically.
Okay, customs, storage, and the unavoidable bit.
Money.
Money changing, yeah.
Yeah.
The Italian term cambio for exchange lines up with the Arabic cambio, or the actual operation of ARF exchange. So these three clusters, customs, storage, money exchange, they're absolutely vital because these are the spots where any confusion, any ambiguity could lead to the biggest fights and the highest costs. Shared words meant less risk.
So the fact these specific words survived points to this shared discipline. It makes you wonder, though,
Yeah.
why these words and which way did the influence flow initially? The survival is definitely about shared values, things like verification, fairness, being clear about risk. And initially the flow, the administrative influence, it was largely Arabic to Italian. If you think about the big picture history, the early medieval Mediterranean, it was basically a kind of shared economic platform. Italian merchants, Amalfi, Genoa, Venice, they soaked up administrative methods and, crucially, vocabulary from their Arab counterparts, who were frankly incredibly sophisticated, especially under dynasties like the Abbasids, Fatimids, Mamluks.
Wait a second. So are you saying that the ideas behind some of Italy's most, iconic financial institutions actually drew their legal or technical weight from Arabic concepts? How did that actually happen? How did the transfer work?
It's pretty stunning when you trace it. Take money itself. The Arabic term sikka. It doesn't just mean the coin. It means the die used to strike the coin. And, critically, the right to mint. That's core state power, right? Well, this concept leads directly to the Italian term zecca, which is the name of the official Venetian mint. And from zecca, we get the coin zecchino, the famous Venetian ducat, a benchmark currency. The very language of sovereign money standardization was, in part, borrowed.
Wow. Okay. And beyond the money itself, what about prices?
Fees. Yes, exactly. For things like duties, price lists.
Yeah.
The Arabic tarifa, it means a list of dues or fares or fees. That leads straight to the Italian tarifa, the tariff. That whole concept, of a published standard price list for goods or services. It's fundamental for fair dealing, for avoiding arbitrary charges, and the word itself points to that shared origin.
And then there's the bedrock of all complex calculations.
Zero. Couldn't do modern finance without it. The Arabic afra, meaning zero, or sometimes cipher, that's the origin of the Italian cifra. Think about the impact. Without zero, you're wrestling with Roman numerals. Try doing long division or complex bookkeeping with those. Adopting the concept behind cifra wasn't just swapping a word. It enabled the whole mathematical leap that powered the Renaissance economy.
Okay, this is where it gets really practical on the operational side. Beyond just administrative words, we see shared practices and how they actually funded trips and shared risk over long distances. You mentioned the Commenda earlier, and its Arabic parallels.
Yes, the kirad or the mudaraba. This is so critical. Instead of just a simple loan, which might carry interest issues, why not partner up? These were profit-sharing deals. Typically, you'd have one partner put up the cash, the sleeping partner, and another who did the traveling, managed the trade, handled the actual voyage risk. The traveling partner, they'd split the profits based on a pre-agreed ratio.
And what did that structure let them do that a simple loan couldn't? Why was it better for this kind of trade?
It was a brilliant risk-sharing tool for dangerous long-distance sea trade. Think about it. If the ship sank or pirates took the cargo, the investor lost their capital, sure. But the traveling merchant, they mainly lost their time and effort, not necessarily cash they didn't have. It was a structured way to handle the huge uncertainties of maritime ventures. And it shows this really deep shared logic about assessing risk, documenting it, that worked across different faiths, different cultures. Business necessity drove it.
So the initial flow seems to be largely Arabic administrative and financial ideas influencing the Italian maritime republics. But it wasn't a one-way street forever, right?
No, definitely not. As Italian business practices, and especially their documentation methods, became more standardized, think later Middle Ages, early modern period, there was a shift. Italian commercial terms started flowing back into the Arab world, into the Levant. Now, this later flow, interestingly, was often filtered through Ottoman Turkish, which makes it distinct from that earlier, more direct Arabic to Italian exchange.
Can you give an example of those sort of newer tools making the return journey?
Sure. Things like new market instruments. Take police. That comes from the Italian polizza, which means an insurance policy. That term and the whole concept of transferable insurance reflects how sophisticated the paperwork coming out of places like Venice and Florence had become. And of course, our star player, returns. Fattura, the word for invoice, coming from the Italian fattura. The document itself had been refined, standardized in Italy, and now that standardized form was being, in a sense, exported back.
Okay, we've got the language of the office, the language of finance, but the goods themselves had to physically move. Let's shift to the actual workflow. Logistics, custody. That requires shared rules too.
Absolutely. And the term fondaco is the perfect link here. It's the Italian word for the specific type of building you'd find in Levantine ports, part merchant lodging, part office, part warehouse. It's a direct borrowing from the Arabic fonduk. Italian merchant houses totally relied on this model in places like Alexandria, Acre, Tyre. They often operated under local Arabic law within the fondaco to manage storage, deal with customs, even settle disputes.
So it wasn't just a building, it was like a little bubble of shared rules, a mini jurisdiction where custody practices could bridge cultural gaps.
Precisely. That shared discipline was, you could say, literally built into the walls. But the convergence went right down to the ship itself. Maritime terms, they traveled with the vessels. The Italian scirocco, that hot wind from the southeast, it aligns with the Arabic shark, which means east, or wind from the east. Sailors needed common terms to navigate, to plan voyages based on wind patterns, even to price risk based on predictable weather.
And you see this unity right down at the docks.
Yeah.
In the actual shipyards.
Yes, where the real hands-on work happened. Ship maintenance terms, like kalafatar, which means to caulk a ship's hull, make it watertight that lines up directly with the Arabic kolafa. Even the word for the huge shipyard complexes, like Venice's famous Arsenal, its industrial heart. That's linked to the Arabic Dar al-Alana, the house of industry or house of manufacture. It really confirms this deep, shared, daily work culture at the waterfront.
The sources really emphasize that this whole system was driven by procedure. Merchants weren't necessarily obsessed with exact word-for-word translation, but translating the function. What function was absolutely top priority for both systems to avoid disastrous errors?
Written proof, without a doubt. Both the Arabic legal tradition, which heavily relied on iqrar, that's like a formal admission or acknowledgement, especially of debt, and the Italian system using riconoscimento, acknowledgement, they both demanded standardized written documents, templates even. This shared need for procedure is why certain types of documents end up doing the exact same job in the market, even if the names weren't direct linguistic borrowings.
Can you give an example of that, where the function is identical even if the words aren't related?
Yeah, think about transferable credit. The Arabic SEC, which was essentially a payment order, and the Italian assegno, the check. Linguistically, maybe not directly related, but functionally, they occupy the same space. The revolutionary idea was being able to settle a debt in Venice using a piece of paper originating in Alexandria without physically shipping chests of gold. That requires everyone involved to trust the paper trail, to follow the same procedures, shared market design.
And the sources point out this obsession with documentation wasn't just for big merchants. It went right down to the family firms, right? The backbone of these
It
economies.
absolutely had to. Italian family firms, Arab merchant lineages, they both use documents, deeds, contracts, entries, and notarial registers for intergenerational continuity. To manage inheritance, succession, they use these records to bind the next generation to the same financial disciplines. You see concepts like amana in Arabic, meaning trust, entrusted custody, reliable stewardship, and affidabilità in Italian, reliability. They were enforcing accountability not just across space, but across time, using paper.
That deeply ingrained habit, that discipline of documentation, that seems to be the core value that traveled. Which brings us right up to today, Section 4. How does this old shared vocabulary actually anchor modern high-tech systems? Compliance, finance.
It's actually quite amazing how durable this shared lexicon is. You take the most stable term from that whole medieval exchange, the invoice, the fatura, and it's now absolutely central to digital tax compliance in both regions.
Okay, let's get specific. How does that look now?
Well, we're seeing this fascinating digital convergence focus squarely on the function of the invoice. Look at the mandatory e-invoicing systems popping up in the Gulf. Saudi Arabia's platform, it's officially branded Fatura. Meanwhile, Italy mandates the e-Fatura. It uses a very strict XML format, the Fatura PA, for all business-to-business and business-to-government transactions.
So the job is identical. The structured digital invoice is still the #1 proof of sale, the basis for tax liability. But now, instead of just merchant trust, the government is verifying the discipline by machine, using the descendants of the same medieval word.
Exactly. And this high degree of procedural alignment, this shared digital grammar, it's actually essential for making today's huge cross-border deals work smoothly. The sources talk about significant bilateral cooperation, things like the UAE planning major investments in Italy, big financing agreements involving sovereign wealth funds and export credit agencies.
Let's just quickly remind listeners who those players are. We're talking big money here.
Oh, absolutely. On the Gulf side, you have giants like the PIF, Saudi Arabia's public investment fund, investing billions all over the world. On the Italian side, you have institutions like SACE, their official export credit agency. SACE provides insurance and financial guarantees for Italian companies doing business globally, often backing massive infrastructure or energy projects.
And these deals, whether it's LNG terminals, hydrogen projects, complex EPC contracts, that's engineering, procurement, construction, they're incredibly complex. They run for years. They must generate mountains of paperwork.
They certainly do. And that shared grammar, that centuries-old habit of needing standardized, reliable documentation, it means that whether the lawyers and accountants are looking at an EPC contract or documents for a sovereign co-investment deal, they instantly recognize the structure, the foundation. This predictability, built on procedures honed over centuries, allows capital, allows equipment maybe backed by SACE financing to move faster, more efficiently. That historical discipline embedded in the Fatura actually speeds up the flow of billions today.
What an incredible thread, from a medieval piece of parchment to a mandatory XML file. So let's wrap this up. What's the takeaway? The core discovery seems to be that this deep economic link between Italy and the Gulf isn't just about oil or geography. It's rooted in a shared language of trade, of trust, captured in words like Fatura, Dogana, Magazzino. Language wasn't just describing things. It was the very mechanism, the archive, for fair dealing that survived centuries of change.
It really was the common operating system for commerce across the Mediterranean and beyond. And, that leads us to the final thought we wanted to leave you with. This shared historical practice, from the Dewan's ledger books to the Funduk warehouse rules, it clearly paved the way for today's digitally enforced compliance. Now that Italy and the Gulf have essentially aligned their key commercial documents, the e-fattura and fattura, through digital mandates, well, they've created a kind of shared digital paper. So the question is, what new kinds of business trust, what deeper forms of institutional connection might this digital alignment unlock over the next century of economic cooperation? What comes next now that the paperwork itself is converging?
That is definitely something to ponder, especially as we see those big investment announcements keep coming. Thank you so much for guiding us through all that today.
It was my pleasure.
And thank you, our listeners, for joining us for the deep dive. We'll see you next time.